April 18th, 5 p.m., and I will call to order our workshop. So we have Mr. Bryant, Mr. Dirks, Ms. Rowe, Ms. Tift, and myself, Ms. Ostendorf here, as well as Superintendent Carson Anderson. Okay, this is a workshop, so our agenda is not subject to change. The first item we have, before we do that, we will rise and do the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. So our first item is our OPEB update. So we have Mr. Waters here with us from Wells Fargo to give us an update on that.
Great, thank you, everyone. And I apologize, I did not get the materials far enough done in advance here to have online for you. So you have the old-fashioned paper copy here for us to flip through, if that's okay.
Yep.
So I will start, and actually, the first bit of information I wanted to cover is a loose handout in the beginning, just a single page. And just with the turnover, I know in the board, just to go back a little bit in time here. So September 2009 was when the trust was originally funded, and we'll look at that more detail in the book itself in terms of cash flows, but just September of 2009 when the trust was funded. It is an irrevocable trust as opposed to a revocable trust. And the statute, the governing statute that governs how the portfolio is invested is referred to as Minnesota State Statute 356A. And so prior to this particular statute, which really expanded the opportunities or what you could invest in the portfolio, prior to this statute with the OPEB trust, you were limited to U.S. Treasury securities and then agency securities. So in essence, you really had a mismatch, you could argue, between very, very short-term, non-growth focused investments that were trying to fund or cover expenses or liabilities that were growing at, think about like a healthcare inflation rate. So with being able to use Minnesota State Statute 356A, it very much allowed your OPEB trust to function like a pension plan. So you could invest in equities, you could invest in real estate, you could actually even invest in things like private equity, venture capital. We don't have any of that in the portfolio, but basically it just allowed for more growth in the trust. And we'll take a look at that in a moment as well. So very, very important distinction there with what that allowed you to do. I did include a number there as well for the current OPEB obligation. And I know, Jackie, you've got a more dated number coming up with an actuarial review. Every 2 years, you're required to do an actuarial review to establish an OPEB obligation. The last time that was done, the obligation there just a little over $6 million. And we'll take a look.
Could you explain what OPEB stands for?
No, I'm sorry. Yes, absolutely. So that just stands for Other Post-Employment Benefits.
Could you give some examples?
Oh my gosh, I might turn to Jackie for that for specifics on.
For us, it funds retiree health insurance. So obligations to our retirees that are in our negotiated contracts for insurance after retirement.
And then can you explain irrevocable versus revocable?
Sure. So revocable, easiest probably to understand. That just, it would be a regular, so these are set up, this is set up actually as a trust. So Wells Fargo is trustee of the trust as well. So a revocable trust, you as grantor of the trust, you have the right to revoke it. You can move it. With an irrevocable trust, and really the distinction is probably more with a revocable trust, you can terminate it. With an irrevocable trust, you've now given those funds over, you cannot revoke the trust at this point. So that's the distinction really is that. You still have the ability to move the trust. You can fire Wells Fargo, you can change trustees, you can do those types of things, but it's more about the access to the assets in the trust. So other questions, and please do keep those coming if you have any others.
Do you have the number we started with initially?
I do.
I think it was.
Yeah, And actually, let's just jump to that. I'm going to give you the page number. We'll bounce around a little bit here. Page 6, and the page numbers are very small, lower right-hand corner. And so technically, I referenced September of 09, but October 22nd of 2009 was the actual funding of the trust. So the trust itself legally was created prior to that, but October 22nd of 2009, 12.5 million there with the initial funding. And then below that, all of the red numbers, those are the distributions. So that's a number that Jackie gets every year from the auditors as to what specifically the dollar amount that can be distributed out of the trust. And at the very bottom, so what I wanted to do with this, in the investment business, we always talk a lot in percentage rates of return, which is not necessarily the easiest thing to understand. And so in terms of dollars, that's what this page is doing. And so again, think about 12.5 million funding the trust, the total distributions there, all the red numbers, about $9 million. And at the very bottom, the gray shaded row, that increase in market value, that's just putting it in dollar terms. So that would be any interest and dividends, but mostly growth, just the price change in the trust over time. So about $6.3 million. And that is current, even with what's going on this year. Of course, it's been a little bit of a volatile time in the market here, but that 6.3 is a current number through the 14th of April. Any other questions just on the original funding of the trust? And maybe I could just offer this up too. When we did fund the trust originally, if you think about the point in time when that was just coming out of the financial crisis. So 2008 financial crisis, getting into 2009 now. And so imagine a school district initially or originally being limited to U.S. Treasury securities and agency securities. So, arguably the not risk-free assets, but really largely looked at as risk-free assets. And now suddenly you have this opportunity to invest in equities, yet you're coming out of the financial crisis where the equity market here in the US was down 40 to 50%. So we took a measured approach in getting into the market. We took about a year actually of just incrementally adding cash to equities. And we've never had an allocation to equities here greater than 50%. We've always kept a large portion of the trust in fixed income as well, just from a safety perspective. And in fact, we can jump back to that now. If we turn to page 4, and if we look at the green bars that you see, that gives you the asset allocation targets. So the amount that we target for equities, for fixed income, and then I referenced earlier in being able to invest in real estate. And I mentioned again, we don't have any private equity in here, but we do have a couple of private real estate funds in here. So you actually own commercial real estate in the trust. And so the targets that you see there's a column at the bottom of that shows target allocation. So you have a target allocation of 46% for fixed income, 48 equities, and 6% for real estate. And the blue bars are just showing you the actual allocation. So very much in line with those target allocations. We do have the ability to work in ranges around. So let's say, for example, 46% is the target for fixed income. We can go plus or minus, let's say maybe 10%. And that's just giving us the flexibility based on market conditions. If we think the equity market's overpriced, we may actually be underweight equities, or vice versa. If we think the equity market's really cheap, we might be overweight equities. So we have that flexibility. With us being basically neutral to all of those targets, that's telling us, or we're demonstrating, I guess, that we think the risks between equities and fixed income are pretty comparable today. We don't want to overweight or underweight any particular area right now. So very neutral to our target allocations. Any questions on that? And I should say as well, when we started out, again, going back to 2009, again, we took 12 months to get into the market. At that point in time, we actually had a target for equities of 40%. We've made some adjustments over time. So if you think about, it took 12 months to get to 40% equities. We were very cautious with getting into the market at that point. So our target allocation or our target return at that point in time, and I'm going to jump over to page 7 now. And at the very bottom, and I apologize, it's a very, very busy page, a lot of numbers, but lower right corner, the column that says since inception, the first number that you see there at 4.79%. So that is the annualized rate of return on the trust going back to 2009 when it was funded. And so when we set this up, our objective or our target really for return at that time was about 5%, 5 to 5.5%, if you will, because that was the number. And when looking at all of the actuarial studies that you got that were completed every couple of years, if we hit 5%, 5.5%, call it 5% over the long term, that would be a great enough rate of return for the trust to continue to grow or to at least fund your liabilities. If we were having this meeting, as Arlen mentioned earlier, if we were having this meeting 3 months ago, that 4.79 would probably be above 5%, not much. But we're very close to that because this is through the end of March that we have right here. And so with that in mind, just to give you a sense on a year-to-date basis, then through the end of March, you slide clear over to the first column there, year-to-date on the bottom, down 5% year-to-date. And that's, again, just a function of what's going on in the equity market. And what's a little bit different this time, or actually quite a bit different this time, is in past periods where the equity market declined, we had interest rates at 0. We had no inflation. We had a growing economy. In other words, we had the Federal Reserve that could always kind of come to the rescue of the equity market. It's a little bit different time, or quite a bit different actually now, where we have an inflation issue. We have a Fed that's now raising interest rates. And that's a lot of what the volatility is that you see right now is largely that at this point. So the bond market in prior periods of time held up very, very well. Stock market would sell off, bond prices would actually be bid up as investors went to safety. We don't necessarily have that same mix right now. With increasing interest rates, if you think of a teeter-totter, bond prices go down as rates go up. And knowing that interest rates are going to go up, we have a stock market down, we have a bond market down year to date. And so that's why you're seeing returns. It's probably one of the bigger drawdowns that we've had in the portfolio, other than if you think about through the pandemic, of course. But the bond market's not helping you out quite as much at this point. So, but again, the longer term number is the one that we want to keep thinking about, that 5%. Again, we're not trying to hit a home run here. It's really to make, we want a reasonable rate of growth, but with the least amount of risk, I guess, basically, that's what we can take. So, any questions on performance?
You're right, there's a lot of numbers.
There's a lot of numbers.
3 or 4 pages.
Yeah.
So what, this number on page 4 says 9.8 million for 11. Page 6 says current market value 9.9 million. And as of the 31st, it says 10 million. So a lot of numbers. Which one number?
Which I've got an even more current one for you. So, yeah. So the performance report that you see here, 10,065,000, and I'm getting that from the middle of the page.
Yeah.
10,065,000. So that's the March 31 number. I looked just before I left the office today. So through last Friday, 9,884,594.
By what?
594. So 9,884,594. So for April, just if you want to think about an estimate for April, that's down about 1.75%.
That was April 15th?
Correct. Correct.
The market wasn't open on Friday.
Correct. Right. Well, so Thursday's prices, yeah, but correct. Other questions? I did include on pages 10 and 11, very high level summary of the different investments that we have. I can mention just with respect to how we're managing the portfolio today. So one of the things with 356A is and in a good way. It's fairly limiting in the types of fixed income or bond investments that we can buy. Basically domestic investment grade, so very high quality. So the bond portion of the portfolio is very, very high quality. Doesn't mean it insulates it from that teeter-totter move in interest rates, but credit quality very, very good. On the equity side, we are emphasizing domestic equities significantly in the portfolio. We're probably 90% domestic equities. 4 years ago, 5 years ago, we were more like maybe 30% international, 70% domestic. So we've made a pretty big shift, and we did that some time ago, actually. Not necessarily really being out in front of, you think about Russia, Ukraine today. The issue that we had was more of during the pandemic, or the impact that the pandemic had on the economy in Europe, or just at least outside of the US. The US market or the US economy was clearly the strongest. And so we wanted to overweight domestic equities, and it just so happened now we have this situation with Russia, Ukraine. We do think, or at least our investment strategy team believes, that Europe is probably going to enter a recession the second half of this year, or it's very, very likely that they will. So again, we want to have just mostly domestic equities in there. And then within just domestic equities, very heavily tilted towards what we call large cap. So the biggest companies that are out there, the Pepsis, Johnson & Johnsons of the world, they have the best balance sheets, very high quality companies. So we're being, I wouldn't necessarily say defensive as much as just high quality, recognizing where we are in the economic cycle here. So very, very, very cautious, I guess, is the way we are today. So
We, once or twice a year, take money out of this, or do we do it monthly based upon retirees amount?
We do it once a year.
Once a year, that's what I thought we did.
And the nice thing about having 40% plus of the portfolio in fixed income, even though bonds are down, you think about, let's say the stock market, the equity market declines 10% or 15% or even 20% from here, and it's time to take a distribution. We still have that bond portion that will hold up very, very well, that we can go to, and we can take the entire distribution out of that. So if you think about that, and you've got a number of years really here where you could ride out, a fairly ugly period in the equity market with that bond portion. So again, that's all in keeping of, balancing risk with growth and that 5% target that we have. Other questions? We actually do think that we're optimistic, really, that we still think that the U.S. economy is really, fundamentally very solid. There are a lot of things to think about now and to be concerned about, but generally, the economy is very solid. We do not see a recession for the U.S. at this point. Our thought for where the market heads over the next 12 months is somewhere, upside of maybe somewhere in the higher single digits. And that's just a function of.
May I have your attention, please? Eric and Jordan Williams, if you could come down to the office, please. It's Eric and Jordan Williams. If you are in the building, please come to the office at this time.
That was my sign to be quiet. So, other questions?
Not of you, but just a comment. I believe we decide as part of our budgeting process how much we're going to take out of it. Is that right? Or it seems to me we've done that during some budget reduction.
So we have always budgeted to take out at least what we actually pay out to retirees. There is an actuarial valuation that's part of our OPEB study that's called the implicit rate. So that would be the actuarial valuation of the amount our health insurance prices are inflated because we have people over retirement age still on our plan because it's still part of a group plan. It is an actuarial valuation. We have opted the last couple of years because it was a budget reduction 3 or 4 cycles ago to take at least $150,000 of that implicit rate subsidy into our budget. That number varies year to year. I think right now it's about 200,000, but as Merle said, we're waiting for our biennial actuarial update, so I don't have a new number for us yet.
But we have not done that every year, is that
We have
right?
not done that every year historically. I can say we've done it for the last handful of years.
And my understanding is that we cannot go back in time to recapture the implicit rate subsidy that we didn't take out before, is that true?
That is true. So you'll see in here when we started, if you look at page 6 where you see the distributions, you can see for most years it was around 600, low 700,000. But the year, looks like 2019, when we started taking that implicit rate subsidies, when it jumped up to that 800, 900,000. As Merle alluded to, I don't know if you caught this, as our value is around 9.8 million in the trust. Our last OPEB valuation, which was the 1920 school year, was only 6 million. So currently our OPEB trust is considered overfunded. But again, we have our biennial actuarial update coming up.
When we have our current OPEB obligation, how much does that grow, or is it not growing because the way that the contracts are now written? Do you know what I mean? Like, are we going to have more people, like anyone who retires this year? Does their retirement affect our OPEB, or it's?
No, when they do a valuation, they value all of our current retirees still on the plan, and they value all of our current employees who are currently working, what their future liability could be.
Okay.
I don't expect it to grow other than more than health insurance inflationary factors, which they try to play into the valuation. Okay. Anyway, most of our contracts now have sunset language on retiree health insurance.
Comments?
Good, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Very
it.
much. Absolutely.
A little extra light reading for us. All right. Next up on our agenda is our response to the letter of non-concurrent. So this is related to the letter of non-concurrent submitted by the American Indian Parent Advisory Committee.
So each year, the parent committee needs to pass a resolution if they concur with our programming or if they don't concur with our programming. This year, they did choose to approve a resolution of non-concurrence. And so on the first page of this particular draft copy of the resolution, I listed the 5 areas that they addressed. And actually, there should be 6 here, so I'm going to have to read through that a little more carefully. But you can see the 5 that are listed there. And then on the next page, you can see the draft response to each one of those recommendations. So, for example, recommendation 1 from the parent committee would be to have written accounting of all funds available to programming for Native American kids. And so you can see my response is that when requested, we'll provide that funding information. So we've done that for many years, and it's obviously good practice. The second item on their resolution was beginning opening week for the staff in the year 2021 and each opening week thereafter. That there be anti-bias training. And so once again, you can see the response there. You know, I'm concerned now because this doesn't look accurate. I'm gonna have to double check some of my the resolution to make, because the year should be 22-23 school year. So I'm gonna have to double check this, but I can give you a summary as far as where we are currently with each one of these. The next item is they want to establish a plan to have AI teachers in the district by the upcoming, or by the 21-22 school year. We did, as far as I know, we did not hire any Native American teachers, but our plans are to continue to advertise for Native American teachers, but obviously we can't guarantee that we'll be able to do so. Now, Prairie Island did hire someone to provide Dakota language and programming for the school district, but that was hired through Prairie Island, not through us, so technically we do not add a particular staff member. Item 4 is a request to have 4 credit classes at the high school, including Native culture, history, and language. This year we did offer a Native American literature class that was very well received. We are planning to do that again for next year, and there are plenty of students who signed up for it. So we're going to continue that. We're also, as you know, offering the Dakota language and culture class, and we will do that as long as we have a licensed person. We've already approved the funding for it for next year, and we need enough kids to sign up for the class. So right now, it looks like we'll be able to offer those 2 classes, but again, we need those 3 criteria to be set. And then finally, their request was to partner with a parent committee in the writing and management of grants, and we'll continue to do that. So we do that for the Title VI federal funding, as well as American Indian funding through the state of Minnesota. There was a 6th request that they had made, and that had to do with providing the Native American Committee with student assessment data results, specifically for the Native American kids and for the Native American kids in comparison with kids overall. So that's one area in my response that I'll be indicating that the preference would be to solicit the state for some guidance on what we can share and how we share it. And that's because, I'll give you an example. Let's suppose we have one Native American child in 1st grade. And let's say it was a bad day, the child didn't pass the MCAs, or let's say it's a 3rd grader, did not reach proficiency level in 3rd grade reading, let's say. Well, we don't want to make an announcement that 0 kids did not meet proficiency in that particular grade. We just don't have enough kids, in that particular cell. And so I'm very wary as far as what is shared in that way. I want to share with the Native American Committee because that's their purpose, is to help our kids succeed in school. But I want to make sure we follow the steps correctly. So I'd like to communicate with the state and just ask the state to provide some guidance on how we share it and who we share it with. So that's the only thing that I'm not sure how they will respond to my suggestion, but I think it makes sense after you explain it some. I did send the draft copy of the response to Burke McGill, Phil White, just to get, and Nikki Buck, just let them know that this is a draft copy and that the next copy will come at the next board meeting. Hopefully we can approve it and then we'll send it on to the state. So again, I'm pleased that the parent committee is looking at our programming, giving us good feedback. This is the next step in the process, and we'll follow through with everything that we promised to do.
Would it be possible for that aggregate data to be, maybe there's a way of compromise to do like kindergarten through 2nd grade or 3rd through 5th, something like that, where that way it's a little bit more difficult to like identify particular students out of it, but still give them enough information. I just wonder if they would have, feedback too about.
Yeah, quite possibly. So for example, we can give the proficiency results for all Native American kids. And we do that. In fact, it's on the state website. So it's just a matter of how much we can drill down. Do we need 20 kids, before we share the information, or is it 10?
What's the threshold?
Right. And then the other related issue is who gets the information. would it be anyone who comes to a parent committee meeting? Or is it just those who are officially designated on the parent committee? So, those are the couple of the areas that we really want to look at. That's all I have. If you have any questions or suggestions, please let me know in the next few days, and then we'll draft, or I'll draft the final recommendation and bring it on May 2nd.
Okay, then we are on to our review of policies. So the first one we have is 609, which is about religion. Does anybody have any?
609, I do have a question.
Okay.
I'm looking through most of these policies, and some of them have sole discretion of the superintendent, or the superintendent is granted authority, which is fine. Should we have something superintendent or designee? Because one person is the only one who can do it, and if the superintendent's not available or gone, something happens to that he or she, then we can't follow a policy.
I think that's a very good point. It's a designee, and so, at least the school board or I could make that assignment so that we can just keep going with the process.
We just have to designate, we have to define who the designee is. It could be school board, it could be somebody else through the chain of command that we may establish, need to establish that. So one person isn't the sole. Now, it's unseparable, so I'm not gonna tell you every time.
Sure.
That sounds good. That sounds good, yeah. And the only question would be, does someone need a license to do that particular work? In this case, I'm sure the answer is no. There may be some policies where a license is required, and so we can just figure that out as we go through the policies.
Is there a different policy for religious observance? Now, I know it says excused from a curricular activity for a religious observance, but what about in the middle of the day when there is a religious observance? Is there something in any of our policies that make sure that those students are excused to have their observance?
That would be in policy, I believe it's 503,
Okay.
Student attendance.
Okay.
In fact, we changed that just last spring, I think. Because we added that, and then there's also a section about cultural tradition, that kind of thing. So both of those are added.
And then I just have a question. Forgive my not understanding, but under responsibility number 3, we're talking about, that the superintendent's going to be responsible for ensuring that a study of religious materials, customs, beliefs, and holidays in the school district is keeping with the following guidelines. Number 3 says the activity must not foster excessive governmental relationships with religion. And I spent a good half an hour last night trying to figure out what that meant. And I mean, does anybody have a really good example or explanation of what that is?
I don't know if we could identify specific.
I'm assuming this is a model MSBA policy that we didn't come up with and draft, so.
I'm guessing that because the school district is essentially a government body, that if the school district were to promote a particular religion, that it would be unconstitutional, or could be viewed as creating too much governmental relationship between religion and, or that the school would be making that tie that shouldn't be there.
So my point being, if we don't understand what the policy says,
Yeah.
I don't know how good a policy is going to be if
Sure.
we can't even explain what's in there. So I just,
point.
if there's a simplified way to say something like that, or help me and the rest of the public understand what this is really saying, because if we can't figure it out here at this table, then I don't know how we're gonna.
Yeah, we can run it by MSBA just to see if they have a better explanation. My guess is kind of like what Anna was saying, is that
Yeah, I mean,
it's really hard to specifically define because there's so many possibilities, or so many examples. But right now we have a relationship with, I'm not really sure if it's not during the student day, so it's a little bit different, but with the church, across the street from the middle school. And so, we use their facility for some things. But if we started sending kids there by bus during the student day, let's say for a worship service, and that would be an example, would be excessive governmental relationships with religion.
okay,
But if we're just using the facility for an after-school program that doesn't have that religious component, then, we'd likely be okay.
that's a good example.
But there's so many different examples, I think it'd be really hard to define. But we can run it by MSBA just to see if they have a.
Is this wording from the MSBA? I'm just reading it. Thank you, Pam, that's a good question. I'm just wondering if point 3 even needs to be in here at all.
I just think that we
That's a
need
good
to
point.
make
Why?
sure that if we're having policies and we're going to enforce policy, that we as a body understands what we're enforcing, and people who are enforcing it also understand it. And, if it's too complicated or it's a lot of big words that don't really define anything, really. It's a lot of,
Based on Carson's example, I would be comfortable with taking it out. I think it makes sense to find out
Sure.
from MSBA, what their definition of it, or they can explain it better to us.
All my take, I think we should just check with
Yeah.
MSBA before we approve it,
Yeah.
either yea or nay.
Well, it's already in there, but if they have this clarifying language that we might want to add, we can
Yeah.
always do that.
If it is gonna stay there, it should be as determined by after what's already there. We're talking about actually the accept relations with religion as determined by some standard or something, otherwise it's a judgment call that doesn't say who's making the judgment other than pointing back to the superintendent.
Okay. We can look into those things. Anything else on 609? Okay, then the next one is 610, which is field trips. Does anyone have comments, questions?
I think this is fairly,
Pretty easy, pretty good.
Pretty
yeah,
straightforward.
pretty straightforward, easy to read.
Yeah, not quite as.
Not a lot left to
obscure
interpretation there.
language. 611, homeschooling. And this is pretty standard state language.
Didn't see anything on there.
Okay, so 612.1, development of parental involvement policies for Title I programs.
And again, all of these are based on model templates from the school board association.
Could you explain how this comes into play? Like, I'm just not as familiar with Title I as maybe I should be. How does the district, is there other consultation aside from like the one-on-one, like IEP meetings or things like that type of?
Yeah,
Is that what
there's-
this is referring to?
Yeah,
Those types
it's
of
a
meetings?
community engagement, or it's a parent engagement with the Title I program. So for example, at least, of course, maybe things have changed during COVID, but they'll have an introductory night where they invite parents to come in to learn about the Title I program, and then they go through a lot of the required steps in the policy. So that'd be one example. You know, but Mike Pagel would have to kind of review all that, you know, as far as describing the different kinds of activities. But I think we have a pretty robust parent engagement component in our Title I program.
Any other comments, questions?
As you were reading it, Kirsten, does it, what's in this policy, is it doing what we say we're doing? Or are we doing what it says we're doing? You know, convene an annual meeting, offer flexible number of meetings, morning, evening, transportation, childcare, home visits, you know, as it relates to parent involvement. Are we doing what it says, or is it following what we're doing?
I think we're addressing the gist of the policy, but I think we could further improve as we go. And so the answer is yes and no. You know, I feel confident that we're meeting the basic requirements, but, you know, there are some things, just like what the sentence you just described, that, you know, are we really doing every single one of those particular components as best as we should?
Yeah. So what can we do differently so that our practice matches our policy?
And one thing that I will do is to meet with Mr. Pagel and Ms. Grove and just kind of review this and, you know, see if we can make any enhancements. The ultimate authority would be the state of Minnesota, and so they do compliance audits of different programs, including Title I. And so any legal requirements would be identified there, and, you know, we have to provide a response. The state acts on behalf of the federal government in terms of the compliance audit. It's Title I federal program.
Yeah.
Anything else on this one? If not, we are on to 613, which is graduation requirements.
Yeah, this is based on the MSBA template, and I'm puzzled by a few parts of it. For example, under Roman numeral 5, you can see for students enrolled in grade 8 in the 12-13 school year. So that's still part of their template, but all of our 8th graders in that year have since graduated. Except there could be some students perhaps in a transition program, you know, they go up to age 21 with some special education services, so there might be some exceptions there. So that's why I imagine that in a year or two, the national reference will be gone. So they just want to make sure that everyone is covered through age 21.
Did the principal at the high school look over this at all? Because I would think, so even just like under H, Roman numeral 6H, I think we changed the name of adulting to something else, like PAS capstone. So those kinds of things need to be changed.
And then the policy ends at 2021, right? Or that's just, we need to add years onto this chart. How often should we?
Well, we do it every 3 years, so this has to follow every 3
It
years.
should roll over, you know, that, it should just slide down, it's just, the 5 should stay there, 4 there, I should say, or whatever. But if you need there, it should stay there, just rotate the years separately.
Yeah, or another way of doing it would be the 2020-21 school year and beyond. So that would accomplish what Jim was saying as well. To answer your question though, Mr. Nemenich was given a copy of the review.
Okay.
I remember we talked about changing the graduation credits a couple of years, a year ago or so.
Mhm.
And that, so he had to have input on that.
And that's why there's that step down. 1 credit per year.
Under I.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we'll definitely change the name of the adulting 101 class, to whatever the new name is in the program of studies.
I mean, that's ticky-tack, but, you know,
But might as well get it right.
yeah.
So with that one, can we make that change and add that to the list, for the agenda for, our next meeting,
Do that.
May 2nd, I think, already? That work?
Yeah,
I
May 2nd.
feel like maybe by then.
We could probably just under I then change that, either 2020, 21, 22 and beyond, 22, 23 and beyond. However you want to word it, but yeah, otherwise you gotta change it every year.
Right. Yeah, we can do both those
Get
things.
it down the road.
And then if Mr. Nemenich gave any additional, suggestions like that, we'll include in the next round.
Okay. Okay, I think that is it then for our policies. Right. Okay, so we're on to other topics. Anybody have anything?
Question for you. Do you feel comfortable with how we're reviewing policies? Is this the right pace? And
I like it.
It's a lot better what we were going through over the years, in my opinion. I think it's great that the full board is involved in reviewing it rather than 2 or 3 people, then basically duplicating it again when it's presented to the full board. So I think this, and a few at a time is a lot easier to grasp than
75 of them.
yeah, I also like the way that we review it at one meeting and then we wait till the next meeting to make the adjustments or set first reading. So I think that's working pretty well as well.
And maybe on May 2nd, we can update the 609 policy if MSBA has some simplified language we could add in for that.
Sure.
That was the religion one. If not, we could kick that one down the road a little bit and see. Have we had, speaking of the Title I, have we had an update specifically about Title I? I know we had an update about how we're doing for
That's this.
like special ed with COVID. We had that update, but Title I specifically?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
I know we had an AXIS update. Kim Thompson was here, but I don't believe we have a Title I teacher there. But we can add that to the list.
Yeah, that might be a good workshop, just because, I mean, as a federal program, it has a lot to it that I don't fully understand. So, to have a better understanding of what we're doing, what we need to be doing, make sure that we're doing everything that we need to be and all of that, that would be good.
Plus, we updated curriculum this year, so it'd be great to hear from the teachers themselves in terms of how that's going. Hopefully, they can provide some assessment data that would show how their kids are doing. To include that assessment data, we may have to wait about a month. Because the elementary kids are taking MCAs over the next 2 to 3 weeks. So maybe this is something we could do in June.
So under other topics, let me get to the page where I can see all of my things. What did it say? There was something about a policy for review. I don't remember if that was just, I guess it's just on Lisa's notes. Policy to review for the next workshop. Maybe it was just like what we're doing, not this next workshop, but the one after. So May 16th, it'll be policies 616 through 624 and 701 and 702. And then also on that May 16th, and we'll talk about this, or, you'll see it when we get through that in the packet, but, we'll be talking about like the board handbook and board policies, especially as it pertains to like our board packet and notifications. and things like that.
Communications.
Yeah. Are there any operations things? Talk about,
I think we're gonna talk about land sale during the meeting later.
right? And the lights.
But, we're not what do we have on the agenda for May 2nd? For the workshop.
For the workshop, so far, just a finance focus and the referendum.
I know we've talked about budget reconciliation, and we're gonna talk about it tonight again. But we've never really had a chance to sit down and talk about it at the workshop level. As to any ideas that we have
Oh,
as board
for
members.
reducing the,
Yeah, if we, see, instead of ideas brought to us,
Mm.
we used to do that in the workshop, and my other thing is, we brought ideas for the staff to review. It's kind of late in the game now, I wish we'd have done it sooner. But, maybe some of the board members have some questions and suggestions for us to look at.
For teachers, teaching positions might be too late, but really most other things we can still consider.
Okay.
So maybe we could discuss that during the finance focus next time.
Sure.
yeah, that's the main topic for May 2nd. Yeah, any other? If not, looks like we're gonna have a 9-minute recess.
We're gonna start on time.
Woo! Yeah. So if there's nothing else for this, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So,
Second. Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Bryant, second by Ms. Swift to adjourn the meeting. All those in favor say aye.
aye.
All those opposed say nay. All right, motion carried. We are adjourned at 5:52. Our regular meeting starts at 6.
We didn't know what to do because we're ending early.
That is fantastic.
Yeah.
Mr. Bryant, Mr. Dirks, Ms. Rowe, Ms. Tower, Ms. Tift, and myself here tonight, as well as Superintendent Carson Anderson. Ms. Rowe is going to read our mission statement.
The mission of the Red Wing Public Schools is to educate and inspire all students as they realize their full potential and become respectful, responsible, and productive citizens.
All right. Next up is our agenda. So does anybody have any changes, additions, amendments to that agenda?
I will make a motion to approve the meeting agenda as presented.
I will second that.
Okay, so we have a motion by Ms. Tiff, second by Ms. Rowe to approve the agenda. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. And that carries 6-0. Okay. Next, I'll draw your attention to our educational plan, which is always in our board packet. And we have an assigned here to guide the work that we do. Next up, recognitions and upcoming events. Do we have any recognitions and upcoming events?
Well, I'd just like to say to the kids who are spring sport athletes, hang in there. It's been a rough spring. Most everything has been postponed, and so once they get going and the weather gets decent, there'll be a lot of activity going on in a short amount of time. So hang in there, guys. It's gonna happen.
This reminds me of 2013, our son was a senior, he had tennis, and he had 2 practices the whole year, the rest are all games, or they just hit the ball and sign your names. Amazing. So, yeah, it's very unusual.
Blustery.
I'd like to recognize, and I apologize for not remembering the name, the young folks that participated in last weekend in the Native American contest. They got first.
Yes.
I apologize for not, I just caught a glimpse of it in the online version of the paper or something, and I saw it, or maybe it was in the newsletter, excuse me. So, we appreciate that, what they did, and first-time participants, first place. Congratulations.
It's very powerful.
All right, any other?
I heard that prom is May 7th. That's coming up. That's exciting.
Maybe it'll be about 50 by then.
Doubt it.
This will be the year of another snow day on May 2nd.
Oh, yeah.
And I know we had some students who were just traveling in Europe, who came back yesterday. I don't know if they were back in school today, probably a little sleepy if they were, so. You as well, hang in there. Hopefully it was all worth it. Pictures looked great.
We also have 2 students on the speech team going to state.
Oh, sweet.
That's this weekend. And I also had the opportunity to participate in the Native American cultural training that was done through staff development on Thursday. And it was amazing. It was fantastic. So thank you to Jess for organizing that. And there were almost 100 staff members there at the virtual training. It was wonderful. Glad we had the opportunity.
Was it the same one, I think, with the
I think it
Mankato
might have been,
State?
yeah.
Yep,
Yeah.
those ladies,
Okay.
the professors?
Yeah.
So smart.
Okay.
Just a minute, if I may. I have pulled it up here on my phone.
Okay,
Dakota, yeah. I want to get the 2022 MIDA Dakota Language Bowl title championship. The winners were Jamie Johnson, Naomi Schaefer, Stella Taylor, and Kenenzi Taylor, Western Boy. And then led by Barry Hand. Congratulations.
Okay, next we have public comment, and I don't believe we have anyone signed in. Have you received any email public comments?
I have that.
Okay, neither have I. Just for the record, if you want to come speak at a school board meeting, you are limited to 3 minutes, but we welcome your input. And of course, you can always continue to email us. Next, so this is actually just sort of a placeholder at this meeting, student school board participation. So I just wanted this kind of put into the agenda so that we would have a spot for them in future meetings to be able to present if they would like, or to talk about different issues. So we had our first meeting just before the last, or sorry, just after the last school board meeting that we had, and we have our second meeting this Thursday. We have 7 kids on the student school board so far who are really interested in kind of how school board works and being active participants in it. So hopefully they will join us at future meetings at some point. Yeah.
Cool.
Then we are on to COVID-related topics.
You can see the data sheet that's included in the board packet. And that's all I have.
I like that word low.
Yes,
How many times? do I have to do it?
exciting.
Why call it a word called high?
Okay, school board reports.
For negotiations, you'll see that we have a proposal that we'll discuss a little bit later on for the principal's contract. And we continue with cooks, we continue with support personnel, and we're getting pretty close with both of those. Going well. Good conversations.
The calendar committee is meeting next Wednesday. We met committee at that city.
$2.
Yeah. We haven't seen anything.
Yeah.
We're supposed to meet in March. So, Donna, let us know.
I don't remember what the dates were.
By the way, Holly, for the GCD, I just copied and pasted what Sherry had emailed to me, that you already covered at the last meeting. So I just
Okay,
put
yeah.
it in writing this time.
Perfect, thank you. I was gonna say, did I miss anything? That was my look of fear, like, what I missed.
So if there are no other school board reports, then we are on to our administrative reports.
You can see the staffing update, substitute update, operating levy update, and then the status of the COVID-related federal grants. And as you can see, all of them have been approved. So I can continue to keep that on the agenda. It's not a problem, or if you want me to just take it off, I certainly can.
I'd like you to keep it on just for reference for me. I
Sure,
don't know if anybody else needs it, but it helps me to go back and say, oh yeah.
sounds good.
Just a question. On this, there's COVID, all these grants that were approved. Fresh my memory, how long is this money perpetual? Is it one time? Is it ended by a certain time? Can we reapply? Refresh, that's a lot of money here, so we're banking on that money now. What's the future?
They're all one time, as far as I know, unless Jackie has a correction for some of the smaller grants. But all of them will end by 2024, summer of 2024.
By end of the calendar 2024 or school year 2024?
School year, so the 23-24 school year.
Mr. Geertz?
Yeah, I got a couple questions here. First, on the staffing update, it says various support staff positions are open. Do we have a number on that, or an idea, or close to a number or anything?
I don't have it with me right now. I can look at the previous listing. It's multiple. I would guess somewhere between 4 and 6 probably, but it could be a little more than that.
Okay, because I guess that, to me, that's relevant when we look at average of 6 unfilled absences per day, or are we counting the absences on those that are not filled as part of that group, or?
Oh, that's a good question. Let me verify with Mike Pago, he's the one who keeps track of that, and we will let you know.
Because I would assume that if they're open, we'd be trying to put some substitutes in it, but
My assumption is that we have not filled a certain number of positions, and then in addition to that, we're not filling these other spots, but I better double check and make sure.
thank you.
I have a question on that.
Yes, go ahead.
Is our support staff para-educators or are they non-teaching staff?
I believe that reference would be primarily to paraprofessionals,
Paraprofessionals.
general ed and special education assistants.
So that's what you were asking, if it was the average of 6 on
Yeah,
a day?
I was assuming that it was
Yeah.
professionals with that, but maybe I'm wrong.
Well, some districts, I know we call different staff support staff counselors or social workers or coaches for different reasons, or support staffs also, so.
So, and the open positions here are not, these are positions, these are positions that need to be filled for next year, but are not like currently vacant, right? Do we know, like, as I'm looking over this, several of them that I know of are ones that are currently filled, but will need to be filled for next year. What are we actually at for vacant, like, there's
This year.
not a teacher in the spot right now for this school year?
I'm just gonna look through the list here real
Sure.
quick. The one I'm not sure about is the special education teacher, if that's a current need or if that's for next year.
I know one of those was one of the non-renewal. Or we had at least one special education teacher, I believe, that was a non-renewal.
Yeah, what I'll do is, Lisa's compiling this information
Okay.
now, and, Amy French is compiling this, and so what I'll have her do is just list the different years, if it's a
Okay.
current need or if it's a future need.
That'd be great. Yeah, because looking at this, I was like, oh my gosh. It's a little scary to see this list until I started reading through it and then thought, okay, I know what position this is. I know that it's, a resignation at the end of this school year that, not like we have. When you combine that with like the substitute absences, like it paints a picture like we have no adults in the building, and that's not the case, right? So I
Now,
think some clarification on that would be good. But
my explanation had to do with the teachers. I know we have 2, if not 3 cooks now
right, that are not
that
here,
are not
like,
filled, and then one is still a folder. So those would be existing needs, I know for sure.
sure, okay,
I'm not sure about the special education teacher, but the other teachers, I believe, are all next year.
okay,
Yeah, we'll clarify next time.
that'd be great. Mr. Bryant?
Thank you. Under your report, operating levy update, and Ann's on the call, I think. It says attaches Ann Robinson Blaze update reference planning, including status to community groups. I didn't see it. Did I miss it? Or is it not available to us yet? Nothing's in the works yet.
Well, we have the same version that we had last time.
I just looked in my, in your report. Sarah can answer. If I missed it, please let me know.
Is it in this?
There's no,
Go ahead, Ann.
there's no change from 2 weeks ago. We will have an update for you with new stuff.
Okay.
What I'll do, Jim, though, is next time that happens, we'll just say no update at this time.
I just was wondering if I missed an attachment. Somewhere I didn't see it in the bookmark. So, thank you, Ann.
And Lisa commented that the referendum timeline is an extra. Okay, any other comments, questions? Administrative? If not, we are on to the consent agenda. So does anyone have anything that they would like to pull from the consent agenda?
Number 3,
Yes, okay,
new hires and reassignments.
got it. Anything else? Okay, so I'm looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda minus item 3.
So moved. Second.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve the consent agenda minus item 3 by Ms. Rowe, second by Ms. Tower. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Okay, that carries 6-0. And now let's revisit item 3.
Yes, I noted in our board packet that we have on average 6 unfilled paraprofessionals positions for whatever week we had there. And then the new hires and reassignments were, Will Toplift is a reassignment to River Bluff Education Center. I don't quite understand how we can reassign our staff to another location. We can't even take care of ourselves here, so I can't support this at all. Others are in agreement with the whole thing, and I guess you can either pull that one out and approve the rest of it, or if everybody's in favor of it, just go ahead and take it, and I'll be voting no on it.
And if I could explain what's happening there. We have a child who needs to be in a setting 4 at River Bluff. It's imperative that we make that change. GCD has been hosting for a paraprofessional to work with, in the program, and they cannot find anyone. And so the only way we can make that happen to serve the child is to assign one of our paraprofessionals to River Bluff to work with that child as a one-on-one parent. So that's why the recommendation is to make that reassignment. I wish we didn't have to, but.
Which means we don't serve somebody else here because we can't fill positions, so.
Yeah, this one is really critical need, I would say, because it's directly serving somebody who needs that setting for programming.
Okay, yes, start.
I appreciate you pointing that out. Thank you. And I was gonna ask, did multiple people recommend it with you? Special ed director, the teachers that are losing the para?
Came through Sherry Johnson from GCD.
But it didn't come from Red Wing, from the staff that need that para?
You mean over at GCD or the Red Wing staff?
The Red Wing staff.
I don't know exactly how all that transpired. All I know is that the request is to place that person in a setting, or the child in a setting 4 program. So I don't know, usually that's done through an IEP, but I don't know all the specifics as far as how that happened.
Because Arlen's point, being a special ed teacher, when they pull my para, and I might have that para serving 6 kids very critically, but maybe not as critically as that one student that may need it. That's kind of where I'm coming from in the, consultation around who moves and why. Do you know some of it?
This para we're reassigning is currently serving as this student's one-to-one para.
Okay, that was the other piece, because
That's what I picked up from you.
Yeah, there was some.
That's not the way I heard it.
Yeah.
There was some reassignment in there that had happened recently, but the staff on the IEP team felt this paraprofessional would be the fit.
so it's a perfect, legitimately clear transition.
Yeah, there was.
There's a little staff movement, the way I understood it.
Yeah,
But
Will has not been it was a really, really recent change, I think.
Yeah.
So it hasn't been going on for a long period of time.
So someone like me wouldn't be short-staffed because it's a transition that's going with the student. If that para was working with that student or in a capacity with
it was at the end, but the way I understood it, maybe this is where Arlen's coming from, there is a job swap that kind of happened as well, to where who was his program or his one-to-one para for a long time is swapping into his program para position, and he's going with the student.
Yeah, and that's my understanding.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I don't like an awful lot of understanding, so nobody knows for sure. I'm hearing things differently, so.
So the student had a one-to-one para, and the student is getting a one-to-one para by us reassigning.
That's my understanding.
Can you speak more to that or no?
I can't positively say what the situation is. I've heard bits and pieces. And it may or may not be accurate, so.
Yeah, at the end of the day, this particular child needs support that we're not able to provide in our school. So that's why the placement was made at the Setting 4 program. In that program, the child will need a one-on-one para, and I wish we could say that GCD has enough staff to make that happen, but they don't. We don't have enough staff to cover all of our needs, but we have some flexibility as far as how people can be reassigned and moved. It's not ideal, but I do know that this particular child needs the service. So that's why the recommendation is there.
Is it supported by our director of special ed?
I did not ask Marcia or Ms. Walker directly, but the recommendation came from Sherry. I'm sorry, Ms. Johnson.
No, that's okay.
I have a hard time paying our staff to be working in another operations building besides, so.
Yeah, one thing that we made clear is that it would only be a temporary assignment. So it's not in the subsequent years. It's for the rest, potentially for the rest of this year, unless we can find someone to take over that spot at GCD. So if GCD can hire someone, then we'll come back into our setting. Either way, we're going to be providing a one-on-one para for him, if it's here or in the Setting 4. So, in that, I don't think there's any doubt about that. So it's just a matter of where the person is going to be working and where the child will be learning.
Any other questions, discussion?
I think maybe Jim has his hand up.
Was
I
that
did,
before?
I did, but I do have a question.
Oh, okay, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I
thought
didn't
you
have my
were
hand up.
before.
Perfect timing.
I deleted it. Yeah, I see both sides of this issue. The other thing, well, you know, what's best for the student, it sounds like best for the students go to GCED. It's gonna be a temporary, my math is right here, it's gonna be about 8 weeks at the most for this school year. See what happens next year, so. I think I'm willing to put the child first, and the child needs one-on-one, and I think it's imperative that that child, since that child's going over there, that, you know, that person has a one-on-one. I guess we need to do it because GCED can't find somebody. Hope they can.
I will be extremely disappointed if this goes through and somehow some conversation about it comes back around why it shouldn't have happened and what could have happened differently. I'm not saying I don't support it because I do think absolutely, like Jim said, kids' needs come first, but now I have some trepidation around the for sure because Marcia didn't recommend it. And that's, I think my biggest issue is that it didn't come from our own special ed director, who I feel like should be making those decisions, not the GCED director, making decisions for recommendations for students coming from Redwood. That to me just feels weird.
Yeah, and I relied on Sherry Johnson's recommendation. So, but you're right, I did not contact Marcia or Ms. Walker. Sorry about that.
So how does that work financially? Like,
Either way, even if it's, for example, if the child is in our setting, we have a one-on-one para, then we'll pay the cost, we'll partially reimburse. If the child is over at GCD, we're gonna keep paying for that, certain particular para. There may be an additional cost because the child is being served by a teacher at GCD, so we may get a portion of that back to the school district. But it all depends on how many kids that the teachers are serving there who are regular kids. So the para professional costs either way, we're gonna be paying, but it's just a matter of if our share of the teacher costs will also go up.
So this situation aside, if a student comes from Red Wing who needs one-on-one support or other particular needs from GCED, are those extra needs assessed to us in kind of that financial piece of us paying them for the services?
Essentially, but there may be some nuances.
Okay.
Are those considered program costs and they're allocated out, Jackie, or do we get assigned the one cost for the one-on-one para?
We'll get a time class for the one-to-one para if the student is a Redmond resident.
Okay, got it, thank you. Okay, so I'm looking for a motion.
I will make a motion to approve number 3.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion by Ms. Tipp, second by Mr. Bryant to approve item 3 from the consent agenda. Any further discussion?
But just if we get to continue Director Towers' comments about if there's other information comes forward in the next 2 to 4 weeks or 6 weeks, please bring it to us relating to this.
Meaning if any of us get information, or if we get information and bring it to the superintendent, then he brings it to the board.
Somehow it needs to come back to this board.
Yeah, what I'll do is talk to Marshall Walker. I'll send her a note, but if there's any other information, you just send it my way.
Just because it seems, again, I made my point about the child, I'm supportive of it, but if there's something else comes up, it's a very unusual situation here. So,
But it sounds like this paraprofessional was assigned to this student, but another paraprofessional was taking this person's spot in the classroom. Correct? Because that student had a one-on-one para before, it was just someone different, and so they just made a swap.
I believe that's correct.
So there isn't an empty position now that wasn't before, it sounds like.
I think part of the struggle I'm having is we don't really have clear answers here.
According to
Yeah, I'll get a summary from Sherry Johnson and, I'll share that out, but I'll also talk to Marshall Walker to hear her perspective as well. So, my biggest concern, I want to provide service to the child. And if the IEP team has decided that setting 4 is the place to go, then that's where we need to place the child. But I'll still follow up with Sherry and Marshall.
Yeah, I don't disagree that the child probably needs setting 4. My disagreement comes with the staffing that we had moving with the child because they don't have the staffing.
Right.
Which that's their responsibility to have the staffing. Like it's our responsibility to have the staffing for Redwood. And we had it and now we're not, but if it's a smooth transition, like I said, then that makes all the difference in the world. But if something comes later where I find that it wasn't, I'm going to be disappointed because I didn't have all the information. I don't want to stop the process per se, because it could be a tomorrow start date. However, people have a way of getting information to you or to the board or to Marcia that they didn't know that they maybe could have.
Okay, I'll start with Marcia and Sherry to kind of go from there.
Great.
So, there's no other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay.
Nay.
Okay, so that sounds like it carries 4-2. All right. We are on to our resolution accepting donations and grants. So, looks like United Way has given a grant to Cobble Kids Preschool for their scholarships, which is fabulous. Mark and Valerie Estabrook for the Emergency Medical Fund, and Schools Active Living Initiative of Live Well Goodhue County for life jackets for community recreation. Want to add anything else, Dustin? Sorry. No, you're flipping pages. I thought I would read them.
No, I appreciate that, actually. As always, we're so grateful for support from community members.
Yes, definitely.
I make a motion that in support of the resolution for accepting these grants and donations, the three listed that you did. Three that you listed.
I'll second.
So because this is a resolution, we will do a roll call vote. So we have a motion to approve the resolution accepting these three donations and grants, but made by Mr. Bryant, second by Ms. Tower. We'll begin with you, Mr. Bryant.
Aye.
Ms. Buck is not here. Mr. Dirks?
Aye.
Ms. Rowe?
Aye.
Ms. Tower?
Aye.
Ms. Phipps? And chair votes aye, so that carries 6-0.
Thank you.
And thank you again.
Can I ask a quick question? I've noticed there's been a lot of donors to the emergency medical fund, and I'm just wondering if there's a list somewhere in our district that identifies needs that we have, that people, I just don't know how people decide, oh, I'm gonna give $50 or $100 to this or that, or if there's a need. I think our community's been really awesome about being able to fulfill needs that we have in the school district. So if there are needs out there, is there a way to find out about that?
I know that one thing that Ann Robertson did is send out information in the newsletter several months ago. And after that happened, there was a significant uptick in terms of donations, but we can certainly revisit it or at least share it again with the school board.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if there is a list of needs. I mean, people are always looking to make donations, and where do you go to look for that? Or if you have a memorial for a loved one and you want to donate it to the school, is there a specific place for it? We'd like to honor grandma this way, or my dad, or whomever, so.
So not just emergency medical funds.
Yeah,
but in a broader
I mean,
sense.
if there's a need in the emergency medical fund, awesome, but if there's a need, I mean, there are many other things in our district that I think are worthy of donation. Just wondering where that is and how we can get the word out that there are other needs, there are lots of needs.
Ms. Tower?
Yeah, when they set up the fund, that my dad's memorial was sent to the online yearbook, I thought the same thing. Like, there could be lots of people that might want to have memorials sent to the schools around various topics. I thought this, but then I forgot. So I'm glad you brought it back up, because it just triggered my memory to, because I know
Really
people
good
could
idea.
say, people could say, I would like this to go to, lunches that are paid for. We would, my parent or my grandparent was very passionate about reading, so thank you for bringing it back up to remind me.
And we're accepting donations for these kinds of things.
Yeah, memorials or whatever. Or just
And when things happen, like the lights for the cross-country skiing and things like that, I think we do well at communicating within like the smaller pockets, but there might be people who aren't necessarily associated. Like, my dad loves to cross-country ski. His granddaughters could not care less about it. So I'm not connected to it through my kids, but my dad might have been like, hey, I want to donate to that because that's a passion of his, where we probably could do a better job of reaching out broader in that sense. Mr. Bryant?
Thank you. It's a great idea. How you ask, so it's the real,
For sure.
it's the real, how you massage it, so to speak, around it, but, along the lines there in Goodhue, we donate a lot of money to groups. A lot of people come to us with it. And we don't, how do we get the word out to them to come to us, kind of like here, how do we get the word out that if people wish to include school in some type of benefit or a fund or something, remembrance of somebody, where could they go here to the school? Is there some place to send it to a certain person in charge of it? Yeah, no, it's how you present it versus, it's a fine line, but certainly, well, good idea to brought up. So.
I'll be talking to you tomorrow, Ann.
Add more to your plate, Ann. You're welcome.
That's a great idea.
Okay, again, thank you to those donors. Next up, we have some revisions proposed to our 22-23 school calendar. So Ms. Grove is here from that committee to share with us information about that.
Be a real short presentation.
Right. Very short presentation.
No pun intended.
Right. Briefly, what this is about is that in speaking with Brittany Keel, we needed to change the start date to look like it has previously, so that actually Cobble will start 2 days after the rest of the district starts. That way, what they can do is they can just do all of the welcome activities and get things together for their events.
Makes sense.
So there are no changes as far as the K-12 rest of the calendar?
No.
Got it. Okay.
We've done this in previous years, maybe not during COVID, but.
I move to approve the revised 2022-23 school calendar presented by Ms. Grove.
Second. All right, so we have, let me get to that page, sorry. We have a motion to approve the changes to the school calendar by Mr. Bryant, second by Ms. Tift. Any other discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Okay, that carries 6-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Next is the principal's contract.
Well, we're pleased to announce that we reached an agreement with the principals for a 2-year period. And that's, the 2-year period is a 2020-21 school year, as well as the 21-22 school year. So we've been behind with the principals. It's not surprising because often we'll wait until the teachers have settled before tackling the principal agreement. We don't have to, but that's typically what's happened in the past. So you can see, I'll just briefly go over kind of the highlights. First of all, like with other employee groups, we have a 2% cost of living adjustment each year. There's also an increase in the 4-3 match in the second year. We increased the number of work days for elementary principals and middle school assistant principal. We eliminated the possibility of sabbatical leave. We limited the reimbursement amounts for education expenses. Instead of being open-ended, we put a cap on that particular amount. We also converted to full work year assignments with vacation instead of counting days. So in previous contracts, we'd list the high school principal, for example, as working 240 days. So we've changed all that. So it's a full work year, but then we're providing vacation. We changed our health insurance contributions made by the district. It's patterned after the teacher agreement, where there's kind of what I call a soft cap. Some of the numbers are different just because of how health insurance contributions have changed with the two groups over time. The next two are critically important. First of all, we are sunsetting severance pay. So people hired after January 1st of 2022 will not be eligible for that. The same with retiree health insurance payments. So for many, many years, if principals worked, I think it was 7 or 8 years, then they would be eligible for so many years of these significant payments towards retiree health insurance, but we've sunset that. So that's directly related to the OPEB discussion that we had earlier. And I think Jackie, once again, correct me if I'm wrong, but this might be the last group that had retiree health insurance, or there's some minor exceptions?
Might be, I'd have to verify that.
Okay, so that has been a top district priority since the year 2007 or 2009. And I think we're either there or we're very close to finally sunsetting all of those arrangements. So those are two big things, sunsetting the severance and the retiree health insurance. We also included grievance procedures and progressive discipline procedures, patterned after what the School Board Association recommended. According to Jackie, the proposal is about $17,500 over budget. The next part there says, however, this amount includes costs associated with extra days. Technically, that's true, but it's a very small part of the reason that's over budget. The biggest areas had to do with the budget assumed 1% COLA increase each year. We ended up 2% each year because that's similar to other groups. And then we had the increase in the 403B match, which was partially offset by some health insurance contribution changes. So, that's the reason why it's $17,500, but the negotiations and I both are all agree that because we're able to sunset severance pay and the retired health insurance, that was a good value for the school district.
Ms. Tower?
Does that mean that that'll eventually catch up with us? And more?
And more, much more.
Okay.
Much more.
Yeah, in fact, actually, I'm glad you asked that question because we have at least one principal opening now. The middle school principal is available. Also, Jay Chose, is leaving. We haven't decided if we're going to fill that position or not. But suppose we do, then, we're actually saving on two different people. They will not be eligible for either one of those benefits. So if they're hired after January 1st of 2022, there's some exceptions, like if they're an administrator here, before that date, they'd still be eligible, but that won't be happening very often. So huge change. It could be two people. Currently, the arrangements are, I think it's a cost of around $85,000 or $90,000 if they qualify for that, retiree health insurance. But because we've sunsetted, the new people won't be receiving that. All the details are in the contract. Clean copy and red line agreement.
Other comments, questions?
I'll wait for the motion.
I move to approve the principal's contract as presented.
I'll second that.
Okay, so we have a motion by Ms. Tower to approve the principal's contract as presented, second by Ms. Rowe. Discussion. Yes.
I will not be supporting this. I've been on record since I came on the board. I have a difficulty with $100,000 a year positions in this. It's just, they're on the upper end. The strategy for negotiation seems to be that everybody comes out equal if they get the same percentage. But what you buy with your money, it costs the same whether you're a principal or a custodian, cook, or paraprofessional. And we have all kinds of openings on the lower paid positions in this district, and I have never seen us really have a difficulty hiring principals, so I just can't go along with this.
Yes.
Thank you. Financially, did we get anything back other than sunsetting of the two things there? Do financially, usually you give something, you take something, give and take negotiations are. I'll give you this, but we want this. But I'm saying we're giving more financial, but financially I don't see anything that we've can apply towards this
Like immediately, right?
The sunset of the retirement, but you brought up Mr. Chose. Mr. Chose wouldn't get it anyway because he's resigned. He's not retiring. he's going to work somewhere, so he wouldn't get it now, so that's, but if we replace that person wouldn't get it either. So, and we haven't hired anybody, the other thing is, I understand why it's January 1st of this year, because we just hired somebody last year on the system. This is a 2020 to 2022 contract. But historically, you would have probably went back to July 1st of 2020.
The beginning of the
Put that in right then, but I get the idea why you didn't, I understand that. But anyway,
To answer your question, I would say no. There are no immediate payback in exchange for the 2% COLA, for example.
how about the extra 403B match?
That'd be for the second year of the contract, so it'd be the current year, but not the first year. But there's no offset in another category to pay for that short term. I suppose somebody could argue that, if someone is taking educational classes now, that we're limiting it, but I don't think there are any principles in that category right now. So I would say no, we don't have the immediate cash back. But over time, it's a huge benefit to the school district by sunsetting that severance and the retiree health insurance.
And the soft cap on health insurance.
That's right, the soft cap on the health insurance should help us too. Yeah, thank you.
It's a soft cap and a generous cap too.
Still a generous cap. Mhm.
The generous cap. Soft is a word, but it's also generous. Not getting any money now, but down the road.
Smushy.
If it goes up 6%, that's our buck.
Right.
8, they get to pay 2 extra percent.
Right.
So that means
All depends on the amount of the premium increase each year.
And the 403B match was in part in exchange for that, the severance and the retiree health, those types of things that will no longer be available to new hires, whereas the 403B match would be. So it was to kind of balance that.
What was the amount? Did you increase it?
Let me check here. I believe, instead of me guessing, I'll take a look at it real quick.
I think the duty days too it was really helpful to spell that out. And so it was very confusing, duty days versus everybody has the same amount of days, but you get different amounts of time off. It's more commiserate with what people are actually doing.
The conversion,
For sure.
yep, that's,
And then it'll be easier to plan. That was part of it too, to say, otherwise if there were some parameters in it, but if you say like, you have to work 150 days, which 150? So just easier to see now if people are on vacation a particular time, or if they're working a particular time, easier for people to be able to work together in different things and know where people
the
are
expectation.
gonna be, that expectation.
And the increase of number of work days for elementary principals, is that just an increase in the number of days they work?
They also received a proportionate increase in their salary because of that.
We
So-
have been paying overages for those principals to do the work anyway, so it's matching the contract to the practice of what is being done anyway.
In the previous contract, for example, elementary principals, I think were 230 days, but there is the option of adding 10 days with extra pay, to go along with it. And I think every year, or almost every year, I granted that because there's always significant need over the summer. And so it was just sort of a yearly kind of thing. And the advantage to us is now we can require them, to work the full year. Because, there may be times when somebody would say, no, well, we have somebody enrolling in July, we need somebody present, more likely to be present. To answer your, Mr. Bryan's question, the 403B match went up from 5,500 to 7,000.
A year?
Well, yeah, so it increased by 1,500 the second year of the contract.
I did find it at the same time. You said it too.
any other discussion, questions?
I'm just really pleased with the conversion of the workday and the full year calendar, because I know when families want to get a hold of somebody in the summer, it's often cumbersome to find out who's where. But now that we have a more consistent customer service type schedule, there'll be a lot more transparent for people who want to reach out and have questions. Just because the kids aren't in session doesn't mean community and family don't have questions. So I appreciate that a lot. Clear. Or,
Just added a lot of clarity.
mhm.
Any other? So we have a motion on the table to approve the principal's contract as presented. Motion made by Ms. Tower, second by Ms. Rowe. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay.
Nay.
Okay, so that carries 5-1. All right, we are on to budget reconciliation plan. So Ms. Paradis gets her steps in to come back up.
All right, so in your packet, you will see an option A and an option B. Option A is what I talked about at last meeting's workshop, where we are adjusting the teaching staff to class size ratios. We would be discontinuing 3 general ed assistant positions that are currently at Twin Bluff School. We have some ESSER 3 funds that we'll be able to carry forward because we were not able to hire those positions for second semester. And we would use $218,000 of fund balance to reconcile the budget to net zero for next year. Through the discussion at the workshop, there was some desire for an option that did not use fund balance. So that is presented as option B. It has all of the same options for staffing as option A. It also proposes that we do not replace the current open high school assistant principal. It reduces 1 of our 2 floater custodians and an additional general education assistant. Reasons why this was not recommended as option A. In talking with the high school administrative staff, they would really appreciate the second assistant principal just because of behavior issues they are having currently at the high school. Things are improving, but they still think they could use the extra set of hands going into next year. The floater custodian was not submitted as an option A option because our floater custodians are still filling our substitute needs. We are still having needs for substitute custodians, and having the 2 floater custodians has helped us fill our needs there, as well as when we have had unfilled normal positions until when someone is either resigned or terminates employment until we can get a new person hired. They have been filling those vacancies for us as well. And I am not sure the principals, I have not talked to them about an additional gen ed assistant, but they were reluctant to give up the first 3. So I'm thinking 1 more would not go over well. Mm-hmm.
This $218,000 that would come from the fund balance, would that be recovered for us if the state increases the percentage by 2%?
It would be very close. A 2% increase on the gen ed formula for us is around $380,000.
Do you know, so we currently have some unfilled para positions, right? So
the 3 that are proposed are to not hire 2 of the currently unfilled positions and 1 retirement.
okay.
Mm-hmm.
And how about for the teachers? Are any of those positions currently unfilled, or would those be additional cuts?
The 5 at the K4 level are all retirements.
Okay.
The 5-7 and the Red Wing High School teachers are within what is presented on the next agenda item.
Ms. Rose?
Well, I love that we've had 2 assistant principals up here, and I know that they've been extremely instrumental in helping get us back on track. But now next year, we're gonna have 200 less kids up here. Is there still a principal and an assistant at the middle school
There is.
for next year?
Mhm.
So, you know, I appreciate and love our assistant principals immensely, and I wonder if it's more prudent to have more teachers or more gen ed assistants, if that money would be better spent. And I know you've probably gone around and around on that, but I have a hard time thinking about spending $150,000 on an assistant principal when we've got 200 less kids and we've got other needs here at the high school that could be met using that 150. Just a thought. And if we get the 2%, I have no problem not digging into the fund balance, but we're not gonna know for a little bit on that 2%. And it doesn't sound like 218,000 out of the fund balance is a lot of money, but it's 218,000 this year and then next year, I mean, to keep the balance going. Right?
Mr. Bryan, I think you're next.
I think so. Thank you. What is your budget have in there first, aid from the state right now?
It has a 2%, the legislated increase.
The legislature, so 2% already put in the budget that we expect the state to pass.
That has already passed last year. That is guaranteed 2%.
So
Nothing for.
Nothing is assumed to come out of this legislative session, nothing additional.
okay. I did ask at the workshop that we have the time to talk about budget reconciliation in the next workshop, ideas that we might want to do. So, and I appreciate work being done here. I'm not disputing this, all the work in here. I am not supportive, you heard me at the last meeting, of using fund balance money, because it's just gonna grow. So I'd like to have, if anybody wishes to make a motion tonight to do this, I'll be opposing it, because I think we should, as a board, have a chance to talk. You know, setting the ideas that we want to do, and bring things up for the best of our students coming forward. So,
Ms. Tower, I think you're next.
Thank you. So we just hired a PBIS coach for secondary, for the high school, or for the high school and middle school?
I believe it's for the high school.
So will that position be housed in the high school?
That's my understanding, but really with both of the PBS coaches, they could work district-wide, but we need someone focused at the high school. So primarily it would be based out of here.
That's because that's where I'm connecting with what Pam is saying. If there is a team of people with an assistant principal who help with discipline and help with the enormity of low-level infractions, which build up into one big one down the line, but there's many of these, I can justify a PBIS person, reach people, you know, a safety component around students' disciplinary and proactive needs. But if that position is going to be housed in the district office, I struggle with that, because bodies and time with kids specifically is what makes the difference. Not designing plans in a district office and then coming in and sharing it with teachers and then leaving. So I would say that it's possible the high school could do it with one assistant principal if they had the counselors and everybody's support as a team, including PBIS. But if that person is not going to be housed at the high school, and then I think that you need the second assistant principal.
Yeah,
And
I'll have
so-
to verify what the plans are as far as location for next year.
Yeah, because it's not a district coach, it's the high school coach.
They can be
Is it-
used district-wide, but the thinking is that we have one primarily focused on elementary, one focused on secondary as much as possible. But there may be needs where maybe both will be at a certain setting for a period of time. Or maybe they'll flip because somebody has expertise in one area, they have, so they're truly district-wide, but we need more support at the secondary level.
So I'm hearing you say that then we would need a second AP,
Oh, yeah, I'm an advocate for keeping the second assistant principal position.
regardless of this situation.
Yeah, that's Carson Anderson speaking, and I realize there are 200 fewer kids, but we have to make sure that things are running smoothly, throughout the district. And assistant principals make a difference, that's for sure.
Mr. Dirks?
Yeah, this is certainly a struggle. I really don't want to make a decision tonight, but I think I also recognize that we need to know a few things if we're going to get quality candidates, if we decide to go with assistant principal, and some other things. So if we put it off, we absolutely, I think, have to make a decision on at least what the positions are going to be at our next meeting. I struggle with the assistant principal at high school. I've advocated for having the second assistant principal at high school because of the numbers for many years, but I also know it costs a lot. If you put the numbers together, we have 3 grades at the middle school for next year. I'm just going to throw out roughly 600 students. And we're going to have grades 8 through 12 here, which is 5 grades, and it's 200 students a grade, but we're going to be a little bit less on the 11th and 12th grade because they may go to alternative learning or PBIs or whatever. So I'm going to factor in the 900. So I'm just trying to put it in. So it's perspective in my mind. So 600 students, principal and assistant principal, 900 students, principal, assistant principal. The numbers don't line up to me, so I'm really struggling with this. But to Holly's point, if we can have other people that aren't necessarily a principal or assistant principal taking on some of these duties, if we can do that, then maybe it makes sense. It would have been a lot simpler for me and what I feel we need to do if we would have had 8th grade back at the middle school. Because then I know in my mind, I would go with the principal and assistant principal here, and principal and assistant principal at the middle school. It's not a choice. I'm not gonna complain about it. It's a great choice what everybody made on it. But, so I'm looking at it in my mind at the end, I guess we need to have a second assistant principal or other means for 1 year here at the high school. And that my hope is that we get through this planner and we understand things sooner or later. And I was pretty much assured that we would be looking very strongly at having 8th grade at the high school next year. We need to go into this position with the idea that it's a 1-year deal. After that, we don't know for sure. So I can kind of go either way. I can deficit spend a little bit for 1 year, but it's very difficult because once we go off that cliff, it's very hard to climb back. And as far as the legislature goes, what I see, what everybody's wrangling about, I think they're going to keep all the money and not send any of it out. That's what it's starting to look like.
Could be.
And then push the can down the road for next year, all the funding is, and hopefully at that point it will. Somehow, funding can't continue the way it is for all our districts in the state of Minnesota with what's coming out. There has to be a solution. Question is when. So I've rattled on long enough, thank you.
Yeah, I tend to agree with your comments. I'm sorry for jumping in. As far as the numbers though, if we have 600 kids in middle school and 2, a principal and assistant principal, that's 300 per principal. if we have 900 kids here and we have 3 of those administrative positions, that's 300 kids per principal. So I think the actual ratios work out really well. Now, the high school also has an activities director. You know, there's some different support systems, but in terms of licensed administrative support, it'd be very comparable.
So I'm wondering how much of this needs to be decided tonight. So like, for example, I can see pros and cons to dipping into that fund balance, but I don't want to make a decision about that until after we know for sure where the legislature lands. So what I'm wondering is, can we decide some of these things and not all of these things? Like, for example, the positions. I am comfortable with the cuts that you have for, you know, the K-4 teachers, the 5-7 teacher, the high school teachers, and the gen ed assistants, especially because those are more attrition. We're just not filling open positions and meeting our class size targets. But then beyond that, it gets a little bit more murky. And like Mr. Bryant was saying, you know, a little more time to kind of explore other ideas. Between Ms. Paradis, Mr. Anderson, like where do you guys see us needing to make decisions tonight, and what can we push down the road a ways?
From my perspective, the sooner we have a decision, the better, because I need to present a full 25,000 UFAR's line budget in summary form to you in June. So if we are not talking about this until May, my timeline gets really short, and it's a lot of work. I'm already at April 18th without a decision, cutting it really close on a timeline wise for just work wise. Now, if you kick it down and you decide to do it, I will get it done. I am just telling you, it is a very short timeline for me. Even if we could decide we're going to do option B, but if the legislature passes XYZ, here's how we're going to add things back. That would give me parameters. Or option A, and we're going to take it out of fund balance and we're going to go, or option B, and it's just is what it is. And if we get more funding from the legislature, we'll have future conversations. But it is up to the board how we move forward.
Yes.
I'm thinking this through. I'm not ready to make a decision tonight. So I am in support of making a decision at the May 2nd meeting. If anybody wants to do anything.
And I'm not really ready to make a decision about the assistant principal position. I would really like to hear my thought, just my gut thought is, and this is just really based on very limited experience of, you know, subbing in here, being in the high school at different times. Sometimes what I see as being needed is just more bodies. And people who have really good crisis management skills. So when I see like $150,000 on here, I think, could that pay for 2 social workers? You know, or other supports that we need. I don't know. So that I would, I guess, like a little bit more time, a little more information to kind of weigh out the pros and cons of whether we replace that position or whether we add other positions, or, you know, kind of the best use of that. So that one I'm not really ready on, but I think other aspects I am. But Ms. Howard, you're in.
Having spent time working in the district and then spent time in the last, few months just kind of getting different perspectives and feedback from people, a lot of work needs to be done at the high school. We've been in an influx. We have a sub-principal, we have a AP who's resigned. There's a lot going on back and forth. If we are not ready to secure a second AP for the high school because of 0.005 use of the fund balance, which I'm not criticizing, it's a small amount, but it is still an amount, we have to let the high school staff know that we're serious about making sure they have what they need if that's not it. So as an employee working in the schools with kids, when you see people in the district office, and I'm not saying they're not working, but when you see people in a district office position and, you know, they're doing this or they're doing that, and you think, why can't they help us? We're in crisis. Why can't more people be working in the buildings? That's an issue for me. Because I've been in that position, like, we need help, we're in crisis. Where's the help? If the board doesn't understand what we're going through, please come in and, you know, sit at lunch or come into a classroom or be in the hallways. So if the board doesn't want to spend the money for another assistant principal, it's our responsibility to say to Carson and to the high school staff, but this is what we want to plan for you. This is what we expect staffing will look like for you. But if that's nebulous right now too, I'm with you. I don't know how I can vote because I don't feel comfortable saying I'm not ready to vote for an AP, even though I know you need that position. And I'm not so sure what else you could use because that, I feel like that's irresponsible.
What kind of discussion has there been about assistant principal versus more bodies, social workers, the general ed assistants, things like that, instead of that? I mean, like Anna said and Holly said, we have experience being in the building limited. Obviously, our staff and our admin they're here. They are making the decisions, they know what it looks like and what potentially is best for the building. So what kind of discussion has been had?
So when I talked to Mr. Nemenich about this, one of the things that came up was the high school social worker we've been trying to fund with ESSER funds and not been able to find a position. So I'm not sure, to Anna's point, putting out there to hire more social workers is going to help us because we're not finding any the way it is. One thing he did mention was maybe instead of an AP or in addition to an AP, a student support coordinator. Maybe it replaces this high school social worker we can't seem to find a hire. So that's been mentioned and kicked around. So that was just in our conversation we had about if we were going to continue this a second AP position.
And by the way, student support coordinator in Red Wing is very similar to Dean students.
Mm-hmm.
So we have one at Sunnyside and then one at Burnside. Mm-hmm. So the preference would be to have an assistant principal. The fallback, I think from Mr. Nemenich's perspective, would be a
student support coordinator. The difference is licensure, and somebody with a principal's license can do evaluations. A student support coordinator usually just is a teacher on special assignment, essentially, so they can't do evaluations.
Right.
This is the exact reason why I've asked for additional discussion at the workshop. This last 30 minutes of discussion, we're not sure really what, this board member Tiff says, what about this here? Has that been looked at? Those are the conversations that we should be having at the workshop prior to deciding whether or not we want to do A or B. That's why, unless you have something you dire want to say, I'm going to make a motion to stop this. But
No, go ahead.
make a motion to table this to the May 2nd meeting.
Second. And a second, two things.
May 2nd.
Okay, there is a motion to table this item till May 2nd, made by Mr. Bryant, second by Ms. Tower. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Okay, we will look at this on May 2nd.
Yeah, Jackie.
So for that meeting, can we have more information from the high school about what they feel they need and what different options would look like for us to be able to see the pros and cons and to choose from? That would be helpful, I think.
We'll invite George,
That'd be
Mr.
great.
Nemenich.
Or will that be in a workshop?
Well, if we talk about it in the workshop, then, I mean, this is a voting thing. So this, I think, will still go in the agenda, but if we have the workshop before, maybe we can hash out some of the details and then.
You can modify whatever's in the agenda, that can be modified.
Right, yes,
I think my hand was raised because
Oh, yes.
I think it's important to also get an update on the safety coordinator that we had agreed upon early on in this school year, because that position, I mean, we were assured that it was going to make a difference, and I want to hear if it has. I mean, we haven't had an update on what they've done, how they've done it, has it made an impact, what kind of impact has it made, how many students are impacted, those kinds of things. I think those are very tangible things. I mean, if we're looking at putting dollars to make a huge difference, let's make sure that we're making a difference in those dollars.
I do think we talked about the school safety coordinator.
We had Frank update us, but we didn't hear from the safety coordinator about, and I think it's legit. I think hearing from the safety coordinator about what they see that they've been impactful on and what they still see as areas of need, I think are very valid.
Just more of a quick report.
Yep.
There wasn't time for discussion.
But it wasn't detailed in like, I did this, we've done this, we've done this, it was more like, yeah, it's helpful.
And since it's a new position, it would be nice to know, is it a position that we want to see continuing, or do we want to change it? How does that work? Because it's new and not.
Well, I think it speaks to the overall issue of behavioral issues in the high school and how we're spending resources to curb that. Is what we're doing with the dollars that we have effective or not?
We're not talking about the motion, so we should probably,
All right, we'll be done.
We should probably move on.
Oh, right.
6-0.
It's been a long day.
We voted. We were discussing things that we want to have on the next meeting, which I think is important to have. Okay, so next up are our teacher non-renewals, and I know that there are some later adjustments to this, correct?
Yeah, my apologies for that. There were 6 names on the list, but I took 2 of the names off because one was just hired in January. So it doesn't have 3 full evaluations like non-tenured teachers typically have. The other one was going to be partially reduced from full-time to a 0.4 position. And so I think there was an assumption made that 3 evaluations did not need to be completed. I have a more cautious approach. I like to see all 3 evals for each one of those particular types, confirm that with the attorney today. That's why I took them off the agenda. So again, the recommendation is to non-renew the 4 individuals listed in the packet.
Discussion?
We do them all at once, or we have to do them individually?
I believe we can. We should read them out.
I know that's what we did last time. Yeah, mention the names. And I can certainly mention them. A full-time contractor, Stacy Mackey Pawlowski. Kyle McKim is a 0.6 teacher, and so it'd be his entire contract. Amber Gardner is a full-time STEM teacher. Laura Lane is a full-time technology STEM teacher.
I move to approve the resolutions relating to the termination and non-renewal of the teaching contracts of the probationary teachers that Superintendent Anderson just mentioned.
Second.
Okay, and these are resolutions, so we should do a roll call. Is there any other discussion? So there's a motion made by Ms. Rowe, second by Ms. Tower, to approve the resolutions relating to the termination and non-renewal of the teaching contracts of the following probationary teachers: Stacy Mackey-Zazuski, Kyle McKim, Amber Gardner, and Laura Lane. Any other discussion? All right, I will go down our roll call. Mr. Gears.
Aye.
Ms. Rowe.
Aye.
Ms. Tower.
Aye.
Ms. Tiff. Aye. Mr. Bryant.
Aye.
And chair votes aye. That carries 6-0. Okay. Next up, our long-term facilities maintenance plan with LED lighting. latest and greatest.
All right, at the last meeting, Kevin and I asked you to table this because of some new Excel energy rebates. Those rebates are going to net us an additional, as you have $42,730 toward this project. The catch to that is the project needs to be complete by the end of November, which speeds up our timeline quite a bit. In order to do that, we've asked how to do that with the Department of Ed with our long-term facilities maintenance plan, as that is not typically approved until July. They told us we could revise our current plan and have the board approve that, noting the bonds on the plan. So that is the FY23 10-year bond plan updated document. It is a giant spreadsheet. Kevin's got to print it out one here with blue and if it's in color for you. So that is part one of our ask, is to approve the revised 10-year plan, noting the LTFM bonds. The second part, so there's then also in there is the LTFM plan resolution, our 10-year plan projection and our 10-year revenue projection, showing we're going to take some funds out of the revenue and move them over to pay the debt service of the bond. That's part of the bond. The second part is for the piece of this project we cannot fund with LTFM, which would be the light bulbs, the color tuning, and anything that is not related to the maintenance of the lighting system, which we need to sell a capital facilities bond. So the bond will be sold together, but a portion of it will be designated LTFM, which is what you see in the LTFM plan, and a portion will be considered capital facilities. In order to meet deadlines before we sell a capital facilities bond, we have to give 30 days notice of our intent to sell. There's also then a resolution in here for the intent to sell capital facilities bond that, if passed, we will get into the Republican Eagle. In your packet, in the background information, we have a timeline for you. So tonight we have the two resolutions for your consideration. One to revise our current LTFM plan, the second with the intent to sell capital facilities bond. If these are passed tonight, on May 2nd, Baker Tilly will have for you a parameters resolution. What a parameters resolution is it gives, it designates some officials with the school district, typically myself and Mr. Anderson, to accept the bond sale on a non-board meeting day, and then have the board officially accept it at their next regularly scheduled meeting. The parameters resolution then sets the parameters in which the superintendent and I could accept a bond sale. If it was outside of those parameters, we would have to reject the sale and we'd have to find a new sale date. And then in June, we would probably be finalizing the bond sale. We're looking at a May 25th sale date. If things stay on this timeline, with the LED retrofit to start after school gets out, and us to receive funds then about 30 days after the sale date. Questions for Kevin and I about the project or the funding?
Ms. Bryant?
Thank you. What is there's a lot of numbers here.
There's a lot of numbers here.
I love numbers, but man, there's a lot of numbers here. What is the cost that cannot be paid by LTFM, the bulbs and that? What is that cost?
It's about 200,000.
240,
There, he's got the exact.
45,000?
240,000.
240,000, I saw that number in here.
Yep.
I'm just kicking in my head here. Would it be better for us, since it's a one-time purchase, it's not an ongoing continuation of a budget, take it out of our designated fund? Because it's a one-time rainy day purchase. How would that save us?
We could recoup that, right? I mean,
What's that?
we could recoup that, and put that right back in with the.
I'm just saying, not putting that out for bids or bonds.
Yeah, right.
But 240 our savings account for the bulbs and then only do the other bonding part.
Jackie?
Yeah, I'm looking at the teeny tiny writing, trying to find the interest cost on that. Well, $59,500 in
It
interest
costs us $59,000.
over
The 240.
plus the 240. Yep.
$300,000, we pay 240, say
We paid, yeah,
$60,000. If the interest rate stays where it is now, not
Yep.
what it might be at. So I'm just throwing that out there.
it would be, it would save us $60,000 over 15 years.
Yeah, I'm all in favor of considering that, as long as it's a one-time fix, where you're not, like I said, continuing the budget, and thing just grows.
Do you have a recommendation on that, Jackie?
Knowing where our reserves are and that this will come out of our reserves anyway, I'd recommend going with the bonding right now. That's just for ease, really. There's no, I mean, we could go Jim's way too, but then I'd need to have Baker Tilly redo all of the.
I think Jim's on track here myself, actually, on that, 245,000. Am I right, we can spend long-term facility maintenance money on the bulbs, we just can't bond it, or we can't use long-term
We can't use-
facility at all?
The squared away, there are no bulbs, this is all fixtures going in. What we can't spend long-term on is upgrades, meaning something better. So in some of the special needs classrooms, we're putting the color tuning and the lighting, all that stuff. Since that's new and more whiz bang that we have now, we cannot do that. We have to do the replacement.
Long-term facility cannot be used for those items. Okay,
Right.
for the clarification. I don't like encumbering our district for 15 years for this project. And previous presentation, we had a 10-year number.
Mhm.
And if my calculations are right, somewhere around $65,000 a year more it would cost us if we were to make this a 10-year bond instead of a 15-year bond. Well, $77,000 a year, but you save some money in between it. That's just real rough numbers in my head. But, it appeared to me that we could probably do that bond on 10 years through long-term facility maintenance. And I guess I just don't like dragging it out 15 years. I really don't like being pushed into this, but I want the rebates, I want everything else. I don't think I can support 15 years. I can support 10.
My concern with 10 years is adding another, 70,000 a year, something to that, out of what we're using right now to maintain our district. That concerns me down the road, especially knowing how they really aren't keeping pace with inflation. They haven't increased it at all since it's started. So I would be really scared to go that
I'd
route.
sure like to have that extra money go over the last 5 years and 15 years, so, that's where I'm standing, or sitting there on that, I guess, I'm sitting here on that stance, so thank you.
Yeah, the concern with the 10-year bond, which is why we didn't bring a scenario, it is still an option, was what Kevin mentioned, taking that extra money out of our long-term facilities maintenance budget every year to pay the debt service would bring it down closer than he would like.
Yes.
Question for you about special education reimbursements.
Mhm.
Can the upgrades, the lighting that you described earlier, is that reimbursable through special education? And if so, does it matter if it's bonded and we're paying it back, or if we're just paying cash?
It could be, or potentially could be, but we'd have to have it approved by the state of Minnesota. As anything over $5,000, we have to get special approval
Does that have to happen
before the project starts.
Of course it does.
Of course.
But yes,
What would the cost be if we just bonded, took the 240 out, paid that? And what, instead of bonding the 1.9,
Mhm.
instead of 166, what would
That number's
that
there.
savings, so you got 60,000 over 10 or 15 years?
That's the 1.6 number.
Yep. So, so we would bond the 1.6 over that many years, that amount would still come out of LTFM.
Right.
Whether or not we did the 240 or not. So the 240 is coming out of operating capital.
When you bonding it.
But if we bond it, yep, it would come out of operating capital so much a year for
So
15 years,
you're bonding 1,660 instead of 1,905.
whatever, yep.
What is that saving? What does that bring us down to? Arlen's point is.
For interest payments, or can you, what did it bring us down to?
We did 1.9, we know what that is. If we just do the 1.6, what is that?
We had the
For
numbers on
interest?
here.
432,000.
And 432, and if we do the 1,905, what'd you say the number? One what?
So if we do 1.9, go back a page,
It's there.
Where's it gonna cut?
492,000,
492, and what would be the other numbers then?
432,
492, 60,000.
60,000.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, what do we get for return on our investment on general fund balance that we're sitting on? What kind of interest rate are we getting?
For most things right now, less than 1%,
Under 1%?
under 1%, because they're all in CDs and things like that.
And if we were to take this bond, we would be paying out anticipated 3 to 4%, I believe.
Coupons on the 1.9, we're looking at 2.25, and then the highest is 3.1.
Is that actual cost, including the cost of writing the bond and everything?
No, that includes the cost of writing the bond, correct.
How much, what percent again?
The coupons range from 2.25 to 3.1 with an average coupon of 2.85.
We didn't spend our fund balance at that time, and that's all hypothetical. That we had fund balance and everything else on 245,000, we'd be getting 2% more money if we never bonded for that part of it. Am I right?
Potentially, it depends on
But
current
if
interest rates.
would climb on our investments, then it could go the other way. It would be wise that we borrowed at 3% or whatever, and interest rates, and we're gonna get 5 now. That's the crystal ball that we'd like to see on one end, but the whole economy is gonna be in a disarray if it gets to that, so. I just really don't think we should be bonding that 245.
How's your head?
It's a little full. I'm trying to take it all in.
Okay, so this is broken out into 2 resolutions. The first is revising the maintenance, the long-term facility maintenance 10-year plan, so that the components of the LED lighting are included in it, so that we are eligible to do the bonding sooner than later. Okay. Anybody like to make a motion?
Yes, I will make a motion for that part, to approve the LTFM plan resolution as.
Okay, second?
I'll second that.
Okay. So this is a resolution, so we will be doing a roll call vote. So there is a motion made by Ms. Tiff, second by Ms. Rowe, to approve the LTFM plan resolution as presented. Any further discussion about that portion?
I'm really not ready to vote on that until we got all the logistics of the financing figured out. So if you push the vote through now, I'll be voting no.
Any other? My view is that I'm in favor of doing this lighting. How we figure out the payment and all of those finer details, I feel like that's part 2. I'd like to move us forward on the deciding whether or not we're going to do it, essentially, which is the first part. Okay, any other? Yes, Ms. Bright?
I agree with you. I think that we want to do the plan, but I'm disappointed that they didn't bring up the fact that you could have took 240 instead of having a bond for it. We didn't bring it up. be honest with that. So I'll vote for modifying the plan. I still think we should take the 240 down the road when we do that.
Any other discussion about this portion? All right, so we will go down the line here. Mr. Yerkes?
No.
Ms. Rowe?
Yes.
Ms. Tower?
Yes.
Ms. Tift? Aye. Mr. Bryant?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, so that is 5-1. Okay, so the next part is about the bonds and all of the different financing related to this. So, feel free to continue that discussion.
And actually, this is only related to selling the bonds for the capital facilities portion. So
So that-
if we only do an LTFM bond for the LTFM piece of this, we do not need this resolution.
So this resolution is only for that 240 that is outside the LTFM.
Correct.
Got it, okay?
Because it is only the capital facilities bond that requires the 30 days notice.
And instead, we need a motion saying we would like to spend the 240,000.
Out of
No motion.
No
No
motion
motion.
would be needed?
No motion would be needed, and then I would take that back to Baker Tilly, and our parameters resolution then on May 2nd would only include the LTFM portion.
That would be the 1,660.
Correct.
That's what the board wants to do.
So by taking it out of our,
It would come out of operating capital.
okay, by taking that 240 out of there instead of bonding it, we save $60,000 in interest.
Correct.
One more.
Okay, and the downsides are.
Timing.
The downsides are we could be using that operating capital for other things.
Got it.
But the upside would be we could be using that operating capital for other things.
Right, it goes either way. It's timing of
Right.
it's timing of when the other things come. So the payment, we could either take the one lump sum out of operating capital and save us 60,000 over time. Or we could make payments out of operating capital and have that have,
Take 300,000
Yeah.
out of it.
yes,
Take
over
300,000
time.
Over 10 years.
Yeah.
But for what you see coming down the line over the next few months,
I'm not seeing a need for it, but that doesn't mean needs won't arise. I was just gonna find our current operating fund balance. I believe it's around 300,000, but I wanna make sure.
That's fine.
Mr. Bryant?
Thank you. I'm talking about taking it out of fund balance of the 5.3 that you talked about in the,
So you don't wanna take it out of operating capital fund balance, you wanna take it out of our unassigned fund balance.
unassigned fund balance of 5.3 that we have. That's what I'm talking about.
Yes, and then if we take it out of that now, it means we'll probably have to make another reduction next year.
Reductions of what?
Something that comes out of that unassigned, unreserved fund balance if we want to balance it every year. So something in our general operations.
Why we just had the discussion with, some of us are in favor of using unassigned fund balance to run the day-to-day budget.
Correct.
So that money is kind of like a rainy day fund
Mm-hmm.
to use. So you got 5.3, and by your numbers at the last thing we discussed, take 240 out, we're down to over 5 million.
Yep, and it's still fine if that is what the board wants to do.
We're still above the,
We're still above our 5%.
But we're not repaying for bulbs every year, this cost, is that what you're saying? It's just a one-time take out of the fund?
it's like buying a car. Buying a car, you're not buying, using it, out of your saving money to buy a car, you buy a car.
So instead of using that money to balance the budget, we're doing this. Right?
Balance the
Because it's
budget.
a one-time, yep, I understand what you're saying. But we would do this instead of that, and this is a one-time thing. The other thing is something we would have to sustain if we decided to do it more than a year.
It would grow. Because you have to fill it up somewhere. If you take it away, you're gonna have to fill it somewhere else and cut more on the budget.
That's what I thought you were talking about.
Yep. That's what I'm talking about, where it comes out of. So,
If that's what we're doing, do we need a motion for that to pull it out of the?
I would need a direction if it's unassigned or operating capital in a motion or in a budget.
Mr. Barris?
Yeah,
So
two things.
keep in
First
mind,
off, if we did run
we
into
might
a
not get it done.
cash flow issue, we do have a line of credit, which is it based on prime?
It's prime plus percentage, but I haven't tapped it in so long, I don't
And it's
recall.
something that you really don't want to, but I mean, if it was a temporary cash flow during a certain time of year, once a year for a month or something,
Mhm.
to get a savings on the interest that's just putting one other thing there. I think also by not putting a bond out for this, it would give us more time and leverage to possibly inquire of the Department of Education if we could use some of the, get special education funding for the bulbs and the controllers for those part of the project. It gives us time to apply for that as it's an option, and that's part of this other plan that we're upgrading the other stuff to. To me, it just seems like it gives some more time to go those other routes with it.
Does it give us more time?
Otherwise, you're committed when you say, oh, we already bonded for it, now we want you to reimburse us.
Kevin, you want to speak to the supply chain timing we need to get this done?
We're cutting it so close right now that he said we might be able to start a little bit in June here, if we had a little bit for a couple maybe or something, but we would not be going full bore until July. We would not completely, most likely, finish every building. We would have to finish that up on weekends or evenings or wherever we can to beat that end of November timeline. So if we push it off another board meeting, we may not, this may all be moot.
So here's my compromise. We can move forward with the project if that's where we're going. We can delay the funding, knowing we're going to need to do a reimbursement resolution because the project has already gotten started before the bond has sold. So for a while, we will be cash flowing it then out of LTFM until we can save the bond to reimburse ourselves.
Last time we were talking on the small
Yeah.
Are we only talking the small bond?
we're only talking about not doing this one.
No, right, that's the only, yep, so we're gonna do the big bond.
Mhm.
I'm making sure I'm all caught up here.
Small bond, baby.
The 1,660,000.
Yes.
Right.
So remind me, doing this project, we're saving how much in a year?
It's estimated at 85,200 or something right now. Yeah.
So in 3 years, we can pay ourselves back in that fund.
That 3 times, yeah, it is 20, yeah.
Plus we have a rebate or two coming.
The rebate is rolled into this.
Rolled into it already.
Rolled into it, but you get your savings on the energy side.
Correct,
And
right.
and to keep in mind, the savings on the other side, we were, I'm taking 150,000 a year out of LTFM, with that 85 savings is going into the general, but that's gonna have to be used to help maintain. You can't take 160 and not give the 85 back
Right.
until we pay it back.
You gotta do that.
Yeah,
That's understandable.
okay. I thought it was veering.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we don't need, that,
Well,
do we need
so-
action?
Ms. Curtis needs clarification whether we are taking the additional 240,000 out of our operating fund or out of our unassigned fund balance.
Right. Operating capital currently has a fund balance of 395,000. And our unassigned is currently, at the end of last year, was 5.4 million.
I say you leave the operating capital alone, leave that there, take it out of the, 5.424, you're talking about 4% of the amount.
I will make a motion that we use whatever funds are necessary beyond what can be covered by LTFM from our unassigned fund balance for this project. Any other discussion about that? Is that clear?
Does that work?
Does it work?
That works, that's direction, that's clear direction for me. And then I will work with Baker Tilly.
Okay. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. Great.
Right, I will have a parameters resolution for the 1.6 in May 2nd.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Did we get a 10-year on that?
I can get a 10-year option.
Good. And if nobody else will consider it for me probably, but I'd like to see it out there.
And their desk.
You just want to stay, we're going to go closed session for the land sale next.
Want me to
Gotta get out of
stay?
here.
Okay.
All right. So, the next item on our agenda is, regarding a land sale. So we are going to go into closed session to discuss that.
Question,
Yes.
let's go to another link.
I don't think so. I think Lisa just,
Lisa, what do you
Lisa
prefer?
recording. Yeah, Lisa, what do you want us to do?
Only, it matters if you would want a separate recording of the closed session, then I should send you a new link.
Okay.
Yeah, why don't we do it that way?
Okay.
So a motion to close. Okay, yeah, I believe we do have to include all of that. So we need a motion to close the meeting to discuss an offer to purchase real property located at 316 Goodhue Street in Red Wing pursuant to Minnesota Statute 13D.05 and School Board Policy 205. Somebody like to make that motion?
I will move to close the meeting.
Second.
We have that motion made by Ms. Rose, seconded by Mr. Bryant.
Before we go into closed session, if I could just comment that the assumption is that after the closed session, that we'll either end the meeting or we'll just give a quick update on upcoming meetings. We will have discussion.
Correct, there are no other agenda items other than upcoming meetings. Okay. All those in favor of the motion to close the meeting and discuss the offer of sale of property, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Okay, carries 6-0. We are going into closed section at 7:49 PM.
Once we do the link.